and lost money, you would get a tax deduction. If you donate money to charity, you get a tax deduction. What kind of people can do those sorts of things? Right, well, you've got to have discretionary income to be able to do any of those things. So it is a progressive income tax, but just understand that there are a lot of things that also favor wealthier people, so it's not as progressive as it seems. It certainly is progressive, but not as progressive, okay? All right, payroll tax goes to pay for this. So payroll taxes are your Social Security taxes and your Medicare and your Medicaid taxes. So all of you that have a job pay, it's like 8-point-something% goes to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Your employer matches that. So about 16% or 15, I don't remember, it's something like that, goes to pay for this. And theoretically, like Jacob has a job, right? And so money's going into his Social Security number, and they're keeping track of it, and they're saying, okay, this is how much money he paid, but it is a pay-ahead system. So that money then is going to pay out for the people right now that are taking Social Security. So it's not actually being held in a little box somewhere. We keep track of it on paper, and we know what his earnings are, but his money is really going to my grandma. So thank you very much.
So they're just, like, it's not actually, like, they're just assuming that it's, not assuming, but, like, it's just kind of not theoretical, but, you know, the calculation is not actually
Yes,
changed.
on paper, we know what Jacob is paying, but it's not actually being saved.
Okay.
It'll be used, paid out at a later date. Okay?
So the House of Ways and Means
The House Ways and Means Committee sets the taxes, and the House Appropriations are going to start this budgeting process. But understand that the Senate plays a role too. So the Senate has a finance committee, but they just don't start the process. The process starts in the House, and then the Senate will follow up as well. Okay? Yes, sir. Of course. Okay. Whoops, hold on. We've talked a lot about Congress and the job that Congress does. And definitely, without a doubt, the Congress is more influential than the President. But there are some things that the President can do, and so I wanted to show you this clip from an old show called West Wing, so you can kind of see, like, what options does the President have in terms of the budgetary process. So, plus it was just a great show. And so this is the President, and we're coming down to, like, the final days of budget negotiations.
Hello. Bob. Mr. Speaker, Senator,
I want to thank you, Mr. President, on behalf of my colleagues. None of us think this is a perfect deal. No one likes to see the sausage made, including the guys who make it. But this is an expression of willingness by both sides to keep all avenues open to an eventual resolution.
yes, thanks, Robert, and thanks for saying it this time. I think I had to make that little speech the last time around. Or maybe the time before. This is our third CR, our third time coming up short. We got to do better. People aren't paying us to duck the hard choices. You want to run through the details, Angela?
An act of Congress. Continuing resolution to extend no later than January 3rd, midnight, to include a reduction by 1%.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I'm sorry. There's been a change. I know we talked about a 1% cut. It's going to have to be 3%.
Mr. Speaker, nothing like this was even mentioned, much less...
Hold on. I'm sorry we couldn't get more notice, but we just came from our conference, and I had significant opposition to only 1%.
Only 1%.
Yes, sir.
We had a deal at 1%.
But now my members have to go back to their districts for the holidays, explain why we kept the gravy train running with a rising deficit and an economy crying out for tax relief. It's an economic situation that calls for action, not status quo spending. The 3% may sound painful, but it's only for 2 months. It'll show we're serious.
What's next?
Sir?
In 2 months, 5%, 50. How many rounds do we go, Jeff? I'm just asking.
There is no next, sir. Not to get too technical, but this government runs out of money at midnight, and my guys have gone home. This is it.
No.
There is no altering this offer, Mr. President.
said no.
Let's be clear, sir. We cannot, we will not vote to keep on footing the bill. You will be held responsible for shutting down the federal government.
Then shut it down.
It is, obviously, very dramatic. Okay, so, can the president play a role in this budgetary process?
Yes.
For sure. Because ultimately, he suggests it, it's non-binding, but then once the budget has been authorized, he still has to sign it, just like a bill. Okay? Can the president refuse to sign it? Yes. And West Wing showed us that. Do presidents typically refuse to sign budgets? No, they don't. The political consequences are massive to them. Truth be told, like the budget shutdowns that you and I have seen in recent years have been more about infighting between the Senate and the House. It hasn't even gotten to the president yet. Could and can the president play a role in that? Yes. He can exercise leadership. He can get involved. He can use his influence and his power. And there's all these things he can do. But ultimately, it still lies in the hands of Congress. Okay? So I'm going to show you another little video clip that's going to relate to the debt as well. And then we'll try to kind of put all of this together. He just does such a good job of explaining it. Of explaining this process. We're going to shake it back.
The debt limit is a kind of financial weapon of mass destruction chained to the United States government by the United States government. Confused? Then it's time for the United States Debt Limit Explained. To understand the debt limit, you need to know the U.S. splits financial responsibility between the President and Congress. The President has two jobs when it comes to money. One, collect taxes, and two, spend those taxes to run the government. This might give you the impression that the President, with regards to money, is all-powerful, especially when you hear news reports on the President's new budget or his plan to raise taxes on haberdashers or lower taxes on apiarists. But reality is just the opposite, and the President is the one who takes orders. From whom? Congress. Congress has the jobs of setting the tax level and determining how much the government will spend by writing a budget. So while the President does get to submit budgets to Congress and asks for changes in the tax level, these are just requests that Congress doesn't have to pay attention to. Congress can add or subtract anything they want from the President's budget or throw it out entirely and write a new one. The same goes for the level of taxes. So Congress decides what it wants: bridges, tanks, buildings, courts, robots on Mars, robots on Earth, national parks, whatever, and approves a budget with that stuff in it. Once approved, the President is required by law to spend the money Congress listed in the budget and pay for it using the taxes that Congress set. As long as more taxes come in than spending goes out, everything is fine. But almost always, Congress puts more stuff in the budget than they cover with taxes, which means that the President must borrow money to cover the difference. In most countries, the story ends here because if their legislatures approve more spending than they have income, they've also implicitly borrowing, but not in America. Here, Congress also limits the total amount of debt the United States can have. A debt limit sounds like a good idea until you see the real-world consequences of these two branches of government interacting. As the total amount borrowed gets closer to the limit, Congress usually points to the President and acts shocked that his reckless spending has brought us so close to the debt limit that they, reasonable, prudent Congress, have set. And while it's technically correct that the President has borrowed this money, Congress has forced him to do it by approving a budget that the President is legally obligated to spend without also approving the necessary taxes to cover that spending. So the debt limit fight is essentially the government version of the playground favorite, Stop Hitting Yourself, except with added terror for everyone watching. For it's important to note that debt limit is not about future spending. It's not a credit card on which the limit will be raised so a crazy government party can be thrown. The debt limit is about paying bills already incurred. For example, the government hires a company to repave a federal highway. But if the U.S. is at the debt limit when the company asks to be paid after the work has been done, the government can't. This shakes trust in the U.S., and since large parts of the global economy depend on the dollar being trustworthy, messing with that trust is a big deal. But there is a way out. Congress can raise the debt limit, and because the aforementioned terrorists have. So if not raising the debt ceiling is potentially disastrous, and the solution is simple and always taken in the end, why does this debate last months? Because politics. The debt limit isn't in the Constitution. Congress created it themselves, and from their point of view, the debt limit is awesome because 1, it creates a problem that 2, Congress can technically blame on the president, who 3, needs a solution that only they can provide. Congress gets to use the threat of mutual financial self-destruction as leverage in negotiations that they benefit from extending until the last possible second.
All right, let's look at the debt a little bit and try to understand what that means. So, tell me, LaCrystal, if you, LaCrystal, were going to go into debt, what would you have to do? Like, what would you need in order to go into debt?
What would I need?
How do you spend more than you have?
Credit card.
You can't. Oh, you can get a credit card, right? Okay. And what's another way that you can do that? Like a loan, right? So as individuals or even as a business, we can get someone to extend a line of credit, which is basically a loan, or we can just get a loan and then we owe that money. Is debt all bad? No. I mean, I have a debt for my house, but I don't live like crazy beyond my means, and I pay my mortgage, and it's fine, right? Or if you get, say, student loan debt is not inherently bad, but maybe you might judge me if I have debt for, like, too many clothes or, lavish vacations. So we kind of have that same idea with the government as well. Not all government debt is inherently bad. Debt to finance a necessary war could be okay. Debt to, like, help another country in need. You've got some kind of crisis. So there's not an expectation necessarily of no debt, but I want to kind of show you, like, who our debt is owed to. And again, I know this graphic isn't amazing. We go into debt in the United States government by selling bonds. Okay, so remember you learned, like, in World War II about war bonds, and they would sell that. And, like, so how did you get a war bond? You go to the bank, okay, and so you go down to the bank, you give them some money, and why would you do that?
To support the war.
Okay, and you're going to support the war, you're going to give the government money. What are you going to get back eventually?
A win.
That money, a win for the war, that money, plus interest. So it's like it's an investment, right? So people like to buy United States government savings bonds because we always pay them back. I suspect that some of you in this room have one. It's something that, like, grandparents or great aunts that live in Kentucky somewhere, like people, like from far away, they send them to you when you're born, and you're like, oh, it's really exciting because then when you turn 18 or 25, you can go redeem it and you get some money back. So they're not inherently bad. If you look at this chart, about 47% of the debt that is held by the American government is actually held in the American financial institution. So your parents, some of them have 401ks or mutual funds. I would bet, like, my monthly salary on it that a portion of their mutual fund or that their 401ks is invested in United States government savings bonds. And they're not like the little bitty, $25 ones. I mean, they're massive. There's all different kinds. But it's the same basic concept, and they mature at different rates, etc. I thought this was kind of interesting. Like 12%, though, is held, this is right here, is held by the Social Security Trust Fund. So that money that we're putting into Social Security, they're trying to make that money grow, so they'll invest that a little bit as well, hoping that it will make some money to pay for future generations to take Social Security out. This is held by a lump of all other foreign nations. And this one is China. So close to 10% of all the bonds are held in China. That could be Chinese financial institutions, it could be wealthy Chinese people, it could be the Chinese government. So that doesn't mean that China's buying America. That means that there are people in China with disposable income that are choosing to invest it in this safe investment, but about 10% of it is being made in China. And then we've got Japan as our second investor, and then I can't read anymore because it's getting too blurry. Okay? What, Hannah? I can't hear you. Yeah, which one? The light blue one.